The night he left the house without his phone, Evan Mercer believed he was stepping out for less than an hour, a small pause in an ordinary life that had grown quietly heavy. He did not know that this single, careless moment would slice his life into a before and an after. By the time he returned, the woman who had shared his bed, his mornings, his fears, and his unfinished dreams would be gone, leaving behind a silence so loud it would echo through every room and every year that followed. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of love to change broken hearts, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Flow. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are still waiting to heal. Evan Mercer was not a bad man, nor was he cruel or careless by nature. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. At 39, his shoulders carried the weight of responsibilities he never learned how to put down. He worked long hours, managing a logistics company that always seemed one missed deadline away from collapse. His days were spent solving problems that were never truly solved, only delayed. His nights were spent staring at the ceiling, counting worries instead of stars, while life quietly slipped past him. His wife, Nora Hale Mercer, had once been the bright center of his world. She had a laugh that filled rooms and a kindness that made strangers feel seen. In the early years, they had built a life from almost nothing, sharing cheap dinners, late-night dreams, and promises whispered into the dark. Back then, Evan noticed everything about her: the way she hummed while cooking, the way she touched his arm when she sensed his stress before he spoke a word, the way she believed, deeply and stubbornly, that love required daily effort. But time had a way of changing how attention was given. Evan's phone became an extension of his hand, buzzing with emails, messages, reminders, and endless demands. Even at dinner, his eyes drifted down to glowing screens instead of meeting Nora's gaze. Conversations became shorter. Silences became longer. Nora tried to bridge the gap with patience, then with concern, and finally with quiet resignation. That evening, the decision to leave his phone behind was not noble or symbolic. It was accidental. The battery had died earlier in the day, and Evan, irritated by the constant notifications, tossed it onto the kitchen counter without plugging it in. He told himself he deserved one peaceful meal, 1 hour without demands, one small break from the world. He did not notice the way Nora watched him from the doorway, her expression unreadable, her eyes holding something fragile and tired. The restaurant was only 3 blocks away, a modest place Evan had visited countless times. He ate alone, chewing slowly, staring out the window as the city lights blurred into reflections. For the first time in months, his mind felt oddly quiet. He thought about nothing important and everything at once. He did not know that his absence, paired with his silence, was being interpreted in a way he never imagined. Back at home, the house seemed to breathe differently without him. Nora moved through the rooms with deliberate calm, as if she were walking through memories instead of furniture. She folded laundry that did not need folding. She wiped counters already clean. She paused in the bedroom doorway longer than necessary, her eyes tracing the outlines of a life she had tried to protect on her own for too long. This was not the first time she had felt alone while married. It was simply the moment when loneliness outweighed hope. Evan returned home an hour later, keys jangling softly, expecting the familiar warmth of lights on and dinner dishes stacked by the sink. Instead, he was greeted by a stillness that felt wrong. The living room lamp was off. The kitchen was spotless. The air carried a faint emptiness, as if something essential had been removed. He called out her name. The days after Nora's departure moved slowly, like time itself had decided to punish Evan by stretching every minute into something unbearable. Morning light came and went without purpose. Meals lost their meaning. The house no longer felt like shelter but like a witness, quietly observing his regret. Evan still went to work, still answered emails, still attended meetings, but everything felt hollow, as if he were performing the role of his own life rather than living it. People spoke to him, and he nodded at the right moments. Yet his mind remained trapped in the echo of an empty home, and a letter that replayed itself endlessly in his thoughts. At night, when the city finally grew quiet, guilt arrived in full force. Evan replayed memories he had once dismissed as ordinary. Nora standing in the doorway waiting for him to finish one more email. Nora eating dinner alone while he promised he would join her in a minute. Nora falling asleep facing the edge of the bed instead of his chest. These moments, once invisible, now burned with clarity. He understood with painful precision that neglect was not a single mistake but a pattern, formed slowly, patiently, until it became normal. A week passed before Evan found the courage to search for her. He did not know where she had gone, only that she had once mentioned a small coastal town where she spent summers as a child. He drove there on instinct, the road stretching endlessly ahead, mirroring the uncertainty inside him. The ocean greeted him with cold wind and restless waves, beautiful and unforgiving. He checked small cafes, quiet bookstores, places that felt like her. Each unanswered question chipped away at his certainty, replacing it with humility. During those days of searching, something inside Evan began to change. Without Nora to absorb his emotional weight, he was forced to confront himself. He noticed how quickly he reached for his phone when uncomfortable, how silence made him anxious, how he avoided difficult conversations by burying himself in work. These realizations did not come gently. They arrived like sharp truths, stripping away excuses he had relied on for years. Unable to find her, Evan returned home carrying a new kind of exhaustion, one born not from work but from self-awareness. He made changes that felt small but significant. He left his phone in another room during meals, even when eating alone. He took long walks without headphones, allowing his thoughts to surface instead of drowning them out. He began writing letters to Nora that he never sent, pouring into them the words he had swallowed for years. In those pages he admitted fear, selfishness, and the quiet belief that love would survive without attention. Writing forced him to face how wrong he had been. Weeks turned into months. The house softened slightly, no longer screaming with absence but humming with reflection. Evan learned that growth was not dramatic. It was repetitive, uncomfortable, and often lonely. Some nights he felt hopeful, others the weight of what he had lost pressed so hard he could barely breathe. Yet he stayed with it. He did not distract himself. He did not run. Meanwhile, Nora was rebuilding herself in ways Evan could only imagine. Away from the life that made her feel small, she rediscovered parts of herself she had buried beneath patience and compromise. She worked at a local community center, helping people who reminded her of her own quiet endurance. She slept deeply for the first time in years. Still, she carried Evan with her, not as a wound, but as an unresolved chapter. Love did not vanish just because distance was introduced. It transformed, becoming something cautious and reflective. One evening, months after she left, Evan received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was brief, it was calm, it was hers. She wrote that she was safe, that she hoped he was taking care of himself, and that space had helped her breathe again. There was no promise, no invitation, no anger, just honesty. Evan read the sage again and again, not with desperation. This time has a strange way of reshaping pain. What once feels unbearable slowly becomes meaningful, not because it hurts less, but because it teaches more. Nearly a year had passed since the night Evan Mercer returned home to an empty house, and yet that night still lived inside him, quieter now, but permanent. He was no longer the man who measured his worth by productivity or hid from discomfort behind glowing screens. Loss had stripped him down, and what remained was someone more attentive, more patient, and painfully aware of how fragile love truly was. Evan's life had grown simpler. He moved to a smaller apartment closer to the water, a place with large windows and long mornings filled with silence instead of urgency. He volunteered on weekends, helping people who carried invisible burdens like he once did, not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because giving his time freely reminded him of what presence actually meant. He learned to listen without interrupting, to sit with discomfort without escaping it, and to let moments exist without documenting or rushing them. Nora, miles away, had also changed. She was stronger now, not hardened, but grounded. The space she created had allowed her to rediscover her voice, her boundaries, and her worth. She no longer felt guilty for wanting to be seen. She understood that love should feel like partnership, not endurance. Still, despite her growth, Evan remained a quiet presence in her thoughts, not as a source of pain, but as a question she had not yet answered. Their messages continued, slow and intentional. No expectations, no pressure, just honesty exchanged over time. Seasons passed between conversations. Evan never asked for reconciliation. Nora never promised it. And in that careful distance, something unexpected began to grow: trust. One autumn afternoon, nearly 18 months after she left, Nora agreed to meet him. Not at their old home, not at a place filled with memories, but at a small park by the ocean, neutral ground where the past could be acknowledged without dominating the present. Evan arrived early, standing beneath a tree shedding its leaves, his hands steady, his heart uncertain but calm. When Nora appeared, there was no dramatic rush, no tears, no sudden relief, just two people standing face to face, older in ways that could not be measured by time alone. Evan noticed how grounded she seemed, how her presence no longer carried the exhaustion he once ignored. Nora noticed the stillness in him, the absence of urgency that once defined him. They walked slowly, not trying to reclaim what was lost, but acknowledging what had been learned. Evan did not explain himself. He did not list changes or make promises. He spoke about listening, about learning the cost of distraction, about understanding that love required daily conscious presence. Nora listened, not as someone waiting to forgive, but as someone deciding whether trust could be rebuilt. That day did not end with answers. It ended with respect. Months later, they met again and again. Each meeting was intentional, honest, and free from the weight of expectation. They talked about fears instead of avoiding them, about needs instead of assuming them, about the kind of life they wanted, whether together or apart. Slowly, carefully, something new formed, not AR. It turned to what they were, but the possibility of what they could become. Evan understood now that second chances were not about undoing the past. They were about honoring it without being controlled by it. Nora understood that choosing herself had not meant abandoning love, but redefining it. One quiet evening, as winter softened into spring, they sat side by side watching the sky darken over the water. No declarations were made, no promises demanded. Yet in that silence, there was something deeper than words: mutual presence, real presence. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you love, or a moment you wish you had handled differently, please take a moment now to like this video. Share it with someone who needs hope and subscribe to Kindness Flow. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that are still healing. Just before the ending, a special request from us to you. Please comment below what this story made you feel or who it reminded you of. Your words might help someone else feel less alone. Life does not always give us warnings. Sometimes it takes something away to show us its value. Evan went to dinner without his phone, believing he was stepping away from noise, never realizing he was stepping into a lesson that would change him forever. Nora walked away not out of anger, but out of self-respect. And together, through distance, loss, and growth, they learned that love is not about never leaving. It is about knowing how to truly stay. The house was once silent. Now, wherever they went next, silence no longer meant absence. It meant understanding.